So I thought I'd do a video and on something that I think is I like to experiment with things because it's fun, and I'm honoring the North Node, just enjoying being in the moment and just really this moment thing, and at the same time focusing on what you're doing at the moment. Yeah. So as you may know already, some people do the new moon stuff. I wanted to take it further and say, okay, well, what about new Mercury? I posted that one already. I'm planning to do some more on that one. What if I missed a date? That's totally fine. Like I missed this one with a new Venus, which is when Venus enters a new sign. And the reason really what I'm doing is to kind of show that, when it comes to new opportunities, this is the time to kind of look at it and see what's there. So let's get on with it. Here's the chart for it. Entered at 12 p.m. Was it 12 p.m. of December 4? If I got the dates right. Yeah, December 4, 2023 this year. Yeah, so 2 days ago. That's fine. And so I'm using some asteroids that I've never used before, but it's easy. Yeah, it's really just interpreting for fun. There could be additional things to it. And we'll see how this goes, but really it's for fun. So we're now going to focus on Venus because it's entering at 0 degrees 0 minutes on Scorpio 2 days ago. Okay, it's actually conjunct Haumea and Sappho and Isis. So based on what I've read, so Sappho is the asteroid for same-sex relationships, and that also goes to like idealized friendships, like really loyal friendships, so really strong connection friendships. So it's because it's same-sex, it does kind of would feel to some very heteronormative or heterocentric. Either way, it relates to that. So and it ties in with it's not Isis, so just Venus, Haumea, and Sappho. So I believe this is the time to go deep into your own loyalties and how you can be creative with those loyalties with like your friends, and see where it leads to. Because with Haumea, this asteroid is very, very far out. It's not an asteroid closer to Earth. And Haumea is a lot about creativity, a lot about I'm gonna cheat here. Yeah, so a lot of regenerative abilities, a lot of connection to nature and the earth. So it's your very own motherhood, your own ability to you're basically your God-given natural gifts, if you want to use it that way. It's like blessings, because your ability to really regenerate, it's not just Pluto. Pluto is regenerative, but it's like isolation. This one is the ability to trust your own real like inner nature, your inner mother nature, and also mother nature, your connection to mother nature. So with Venus there, it's our relationship with the planet and how we relate to it on a very equal level, because it's still Sappho, right? Sappho still would represent equality to some degree, because it is same-sex, or rather it is, what did I put here for Sappho? So basically intimacy, real vulnerability, sensibility, neutrality. I call it like, it's kind of like your divine feminine. I saw it from this website, but it's basically really strong bonds with your feminine side and with others, whether you're talking about women or men or gender neutral people, it doesn't matter. So your sensitivity towards being a connection to them, it's beyond just simple friendships. Being, it also ties in with sexual preference as well, of course, naturally, but it's really about that, like, sharing unconditional friendships, if that makes sense, transcendent friendships. And with Venus there, it definitely shows how we can see that as part of, like, you are as much worthy as I am in our connection to Mother Earth and nature, and our ability to grow together, connect, and really, really connect, but through a very natural way. Right? With the conjunct there, it's showing a lot of potential to go really, really, really deep, because it's in Scorpio. So when I say deep, I mean like transformative deep. Right? It's Plutonian. So, and because it is in Scorpio, we look into where Pluto is right now. And now it is in, 28 degrees of Capricorn. So it's still waning back. So it's still kind of, so with that in Capricorn, it's nearing the end of its journeys, and Pluto's in Capricorn right now. It's feels like there's a sort of a rush to connect, probably with people in a very natural way. There might be sort of this sort of a hurried sort of feeling of like push to like connect, because people might want to really go deep into and become sort of almost egoic, because it is through Venus. Venus is a personal planet. And so with Pluto influencing that with Capricorn energy, it's very grounded. Yes, it's true. But there's also this square you can see here. There's a square aspect to those planets right here. Right here. All three. 1, 2, 3. Right here. And so with the square, and also being an influence on Venus, Pluto kind of this kind of like the last call for breaking down traditions, breaking down things that are the old, or things that don't work anymore, structures that no longer that serve greater humanity, because it is transitioning into Aquarius. And people are starting to probably feel the intensity in relationships in a very sort of, things are kind of becoming more, people probably feel like they should still isolate. People should be more like who to choose and who to not trust and who to trust and all that stuff. So there's a lot of fear behind it as well, because there's a bit of that, do we keep the order as it is or do we not? But I think it's a balance of, with Venus there squaring, it's time to really hone that, what is real relationship in the first place? Not from an egoic perspective. Even then, but you can learn from that, and we can learn from the whole, what the ego wants, with how we can transcend that desire itself. In other words, with the transcendence past the egoic desires, it becomes a healthy ego, and creating boundaries, right? Creating not just boundaries, but creating like distances, and kind of getting rid of relationships that no longer work, and introducing probably new ones, kind of at a slower, more gradual pace. And this hurried sort of feel of Pluto nearing the end of its journey in Capricorn might feel kind of rushed, but this is not the time to rush. It's a time to go inwards even more. Your own relationship with yourself, your own Sappho, your own Haumea, your own creative homosexuality inside, your own gayness. Do you love yourself enough? Right? And when I say love yourself, I mean that trusting in the connection. It's not egoic, it's not from a place of like insistence, it's not a place of irritation, it's not a place of, you'll know it feels heavy. when it's a negative sort of aspect, but even when it comes to like really highly positive emotions, because eventually we want, when in order for us to go past all this stuff, this sort of polarity, which is also represented by Venus, can be, is we have to work with the fact that there's more to life than just identification. But we are in the third dimension, so naturally there's going to be identification, there's going to be polarity, there's going to be, shifting back and forth. But the goal is always kind of like, you could go down, okay, then go back up, go back down, okay. But always making a decision. This is a time to be kind of more committed to an inner work, and inner processing, and inner... Basically, Venus rules the 7th house, so that still has a lot to do with the shadow. Co-ruled with Eris, I believe so. Let's see if there's any aspect to Venus with Eris. To some degree, yeah. It's far off. It is 9 degrees off, but usually the orb is usually 8 degrees because it needs to be really powerful. But it is opposite of Valentine right now, Jupiter conjunction, but in retrograde. So Valentine, according to what I read here, it's the way how we express our love for other people. Okay? Affection, according to Mystic something, the website, they say heartfelt connections, sacrifices, so things that you would do to express. Valentine is the expression of this earthly love, right? But we have to kind of watch out for that whole not giving into relationships that again don't serve us, because you're trying to figure out what that means. So because Valentine is retrograde, it's discovering how you give yourself respect for your own personal growth, how you elevate. It's a step-by-step process, but you have to stick with it. Especially with Valentine and Jupiter conjunction, the expansiveness is more like you feel like you can't grow. You probably feel like there's no way to express this sort of love that you have for either yourself or the collective. And with that in Taurus, it's definitely like a lot slower. The pace feels a lot like it's kind of closed in. But we have to be patient with that. We have to allow ourselves. This is why we go back to the inner work by just grounding ourselves in now. So with this opposition with Venus, it's an internal work. So I would say, if I were in this case, for me, what I would do is, if you're awakened and you're still processing it, journaling probably help. A lot of try the Wim Hof method. Try the breathing first and then do the cold showers. This is what I've always done. I recommended it to some people. You could give it a try. See if you're called to it, but don't just judge it because it's like, it's scary. Go with the fear. This opposition is showing the desire for transformation, but also the desire for comfort, right? So it's like, where do you go? So you have to find that you can't be comfortable. Real comfortable, genuine comfort cannot be attained without discomfort. So in other words, there's a thing there. It's between Taurus and Scorpio, right? They're very, very opposite, so naturally. And so you have to find a balance between the two and figure out, so genuine discomfort, genuine comfort. Because you can't also be completely discomfort. You can't be completely uncomfortable. You can't always be like just transformed for the sake of transformation. And comfort for the sake of comfort is also, it doesn't serve a purpose. So finding that balance, but really starting with bringing your attention to the body by doing things. For me, when I did the Wim Hof method, when I started doing it, it really did more than just the Wim Hof method. It helped me to surrender to the moment, and because you go through the cold, and it's just this sort of, okay, I can trust that, and that's okay. I can go with that, right? Let's see if that does anything. Okay. Okay. So there's that, but there's also this T-square to Pluto as well. So with the Pluto there, you see this T-square. Can't really see. Right here. Right here. And with T-square also, I'm going to include the ascendant this time. So basically, it might be, you might question your own role in society and how you process this internal struggle to love yourself, to process how you express how you do things for yourself, like things like, simple things like if you want to buy yourself things, but those are very superficial, but not in a judgmental way. It's just very earthly things. It's okay to enjoy just third dimension things without being attached to them, right? So this is where true optimism comes through, because when you get things and you're optimistic about it and you're like, oh, it's nice, but then you're like, and then over time it just loses the feeling. You just like, it's because it's very identified with external joy, external happiness, external this, external love. It's not outside of ourselves. So with Pluto there squaring it, it's a chance for us to also break down what that means, to embrace our own inner, you could call it voice, your inner language, your inner love for yourself, your inner, it's really starts from the inside. How that works for anyone is, it's different for every person, I would say. However, there is a general thing where there has to be a way for us to get grounded, go back to the attention of the body, like breathing stuff. You can time yourself if you want to, create journals, go through the process, but once you've expressed the emotions, sit with it and surrender to it instead of like going back to the same story over and over and over again. Because it doesn't work when you repeat the story over and over again, because you start to believe it, right? A belief is a thought that repeats itself. So with this, let's take a look if there's anything else. There is a healing process that we can go through naturally through this grand trine right here. I see it right away. So Eros represents, what is this? Naturally, people have seen Eros as a yearning for intimacy, connection, really deep connections. It's a Mars-Venus sort of energy. So eroticism for sure, turn-ons and turn-offs, but instead of relying on that sort of lustful, because there's a thin line between lust and intimacy, right? So with Eros, Eros kind of jumps between the two. This Mars and Venus, one sexuality, one sensuality, and with it conjunct Saturn. So Eros is in Aquarius and Saturn is in Pisces right now. So there's this sort of pull, this sort of probably feeling of nervous transition into finding different ways to be curious and quirky and getting into the weird shit and all that stuff, but starting to let go of that and trying to figure out what means more, what is more meaningful, because it's going to transition into Pisces, and eventually we're going to have to let that go. Like, oh, I want this, I want to be, what do you call this? The word innovative still comes through, but it's really about being creative. So instead of just being quirky, just kind of let yourself experiment naturally and easily, but without rushing things. That's the whole degree theory. Based on degree theory, it's like when a planet or a planetary body is in the last few degrees of a sign, it means the energy is kind of rushed. It feels kind of like it has an urgency to it. Not necessarily rushed, but can be. And with it conjunct Saturn in first degree in Pisces, there's a kind of a halting of that idealism. So it kind of makes us feel like we cannot be in touch with the ether and what's up there. Instead, we kind of get stuck in this earthly realm sort of thing. But we can use that to our advantage and use the gifts and find the gifts in this earthly realm, this third dimension. At the same time, honor our own sacredness with how we feel about that emotionally, literally in honoring those emotions, because we have Vesta here trine to these. This is a grand trine, but it's in retrograde. Vesta in retrograde is a constant repetition of having to commit yourself and devote yourself to your own personal security, your own health, your own, yes, it's a little bit of health, but your own emotional well-being, feeling at home. So with the trine here, there might be this natural flow of like, okay, I can work with this. I can see that it's like I need to commit to my own creativity, my own gayness, my own appreciation of myself and other people, and how I extend that so that it doesn't project onto them, but rather, okay, there's natural flow. But what happens is when there's a trine, some external things might come through, or other people that you meet that don't agree with that. It's time to put those aside and say, okay, right? Eros, in this case, is at the end. It's like kind of not really relinquishing the unique things about your own sexuality, your own ability to relate at a very intimate, deep soul level. And those that don't work with it, that's fine. You can say your piece and say, okay, this is where you are right now, this is where I am right now. That's totally fine. And really devote yourself to that and don't commit to the point where you just like, you have to force yourself. Real commitment doesn't come through if it feels imposed, if it feels like an obligation. It has to feel natural. It has to feel you feel more at ease with it, and you're like, okay, I can do this. So relates back to when I mentioned the Wim Hof method. For me, that works because I wanted something more physically grounding, something to kind of push me a lot more, and it worked for me. So it works for you, but definitely give things a try, whatever it is, whatever modality you choose, whatever you do, give things a try, and don't just give up just because I'm afraid of it. Right? You can go back to it. You fall off the horse. Be okay with falling off the horse. It's just gravity, right? It's the law of gravity. You're just falling off the horse, literally and figuratively. You're falling off. It's there. Find the gifts in the fucking like rainbow of things of gravity. When you fall off, fine. Leaves fall off from a tree. So you go with that. The tree doesn't do anything but just like, okay. It's the same thing, right? So you work with this natural trine because eventually it's going to express itself through relationships, through fears, and through also a sense of like purity, a sense of like maybe a little bit dogmatic, it might express itself. If we don't work with these energies, it might kind of just come out in one way or another. It could be any area of your life, really. So this is part of the trine aspect, is to keep us comfortable, but at the same time, if there's external forces, you have to kind of wake up. And this is why it's good to practice waking up, or being more conscious and being in the present moment, even as Eckhart Tolle says, when it is optimal. So when you have time to, when you know you have like a whole day or hours to be, just practice. Put it into practice. And this is where Saturn comes into it, and also Vesta. The Vesta, and it's really putting it into practice. Trying to find a balance as well between emotional erraticness, or unpredictability, but also balancing that. Where there's Libra, there's that whole. Well, it was past Libra, so I mean Scorpio. So, but learning to balance all those things. Okay. But with the trine, though, it is affected by probable. Here we have Moon, opposite of Saturn. With Moon opposing Saturn, well, at least in the next few days, there's this emotional instability that might feel. Learn to know when to feel and express emotions, and learn not to. That ties into how this affects the Venus, right? Because we're looking at it here. But at the same time, Moon, right here, is sextile to Sappho. With Moon sextile to Sappho, this is just inner gift to potential to really work with the emotions and what it feels to be not only literally gay, but also like your own inner, like yourself. It's a kind of mirroring of yourself. In a way, it's the same thing as like the shadow. It's kind of like Venus and Aries as well. So there's that whole opportunity to go deep and to look into your darker side, your lighter side, and really balance those emotions and figure out why is it that I'm feeling this way. So journaling definitely will help, especially with Moon in Virgo right now. It's good to kind of get those facts and pay attention to patterns as well, seeing what happens when you do this, So it all kind of ties in together. So you can use that energy because the Moon is sextile to Sappho. That affects the conjunction to Venus and Haumea. When you look into yourself and inwards, you're able to download. You're able to get all these things that come through, and it's like, okay. So you get sort of inspired. So it becomes sort of a natural inspiration. That's where Haumea comes in, right? Yeah. So the focus is on Venus. I'm not going to do the whole thing because the focus is on Venus right now. So the Venus in ourselves, remember, it's about self-worth as well. So we want to be able to see where, because Venus is in Scorpio, it is in detriment, or it is in its fall. Detriment. So it's in its fall, so the energy of Venus doesn't work as well as it would in Taurus. However, that doesn't necessarily mean that that doesn't work. It just means that the process is a little bit more, inwards. It's not as expressive. It's not as expressive. It's not really about comfort as much as more like what is genuine comfort. It's Pluto ruled, right? So it's time for us to dig deep into what that means individually and collectively. There's also the sextile from Venus, these three planets, to Penelope Mercury conjunct. So Penelope, let me go back here. Penelope is over giving of yourself. Penelope, I believe, is also it's almost ties into what is that one? It's it's Neptune meets Juno, right? And Neptune, June, and it's a Juno Neptune sort of an energy. So it's like self-sacrificing, over too loyal, too much, like, or in this case, because it's in conjunction Mercury, it's probably overcompensating, similar to Saturn actually, but overcompensating with what we express, how we express that. And it kind of ties back into what is that, to Valentine, right? Because also here we have Mercury, these two planets. So Penelope with conjunct Mercury is trining this. So there might be a tendency for us to exaggerate or to kind of push ourselves beyond what's necessary. So that affects Mercury Penelope conjunction. This whole, like, is maybe more like not exaggerative in terms of how we express ourselves, but how we find internally we kind of continue to doubt our own ability to expand, to grow, and really sort of we have a doubt of our own optimism and say, okay, well, I can do this. It's almost like it's forced, right? And with it trining Penelope, Mercury conjunction, it's almost natural for us to feel like we kind of need to feel trapped. But sometimes this is why preparing ourselves ahead of time, so to speak, and really putting into practice what is genuinely what we really want, what we want to express, and really committing to that, but not over committing to it. So Penelope has a tendency to exaggerate. It's a little bit also like Sagittarius, very much like what Jupiter is there too as well. So there's a tendency to exaggerate. There's a tendency to, like, loyal to a fault. That's a very Penelope sort of thing. So we don't want to be too loyal, especially if the loyalty is to something that that just sucks the life out of us. It just is draining. It's negative. Yeah. So watch out for that and be kind of like, when I did my new Mercury post, it's when I told you about new beginnings, when it's now Mercury in Capricorn, I believe I mentioned that it's time to kind of slow down how we process planning and what we desire, what we want to express, and how we go about in communication with others. It's not just about information, it's about communication itself. Like, communication is this process of, it's a balance, right? It's a flow. So even though there might be a tendency to kind of close in and doubt ourselves, let it flow. Let it flow. Let it flow. Let it flow. Okay. So, and we can actually make use of that energy and tap into that ability to say, okay, is this enough? Is this enough? Just enough is enough. Meaning, like, it's not about too much or too less. Again, balance. It's funny because there's just one right here. There's this trine here. This isn't related directly to Venus, but it does have that trine where we feel like we're kind of maybe in an emotional, sort of like, not necessarily negative emotional roller coaster, but it kind of like, it feels like this one is continuously reminding us to kind of, or reveal maybe that it's continual doubt of our own ability to move past our limits, because we kind of question our own ability to just take it easy and just trust, right? Jupiter is about faith, so trusting that. But sometimes we kind of don't, and it kind of repeats itself. So eventually it is going to express itself. Like I said, trine is very locked in, kind of. When there's a grand trine like this, feels locked in. It has to come out somehow. So whenever something comes in, you meet a new person or you're talking to somebody, going back to that inner work, inner process, practice. I wanted to look into another chart, but let's see if you have time for that one. Okay. So this one is Venus opposes Jupiter, of course, naturally. Venus, okay, we've done that already. So nymph is also conjunct to Mercury here. So therefore it's kind of nymph, and then you have, here, I'll show you. So nympho, I forgot what the asteroid name is. Katia, Bacchus, this is... I don't think I have anything on nympho. But I believe... Let's go back here. So nymphy. Sexuality, react negative to one's sexuality. Oh, okay, sexual craze. Okay, that makes sense. Because nymph, okay, so there might be questioning of, or self-doubt, and like your self-worth is affected by how people kind of react negatively to your own expression of yourself, in terms of like your own sexuality, your own ability to embrace your own gayness, your own, your loyalty to your friends. People might perceive you as, you're so gay and all that stuff. We can work with that energy and say like, well, if that's the case, what is nymph representing in this case? Right, the shadow. We look into the shadow thing and say, okay, well, especially with Mercury in the middle between nymph and, what was the other one? And Penelope, it's committing to that whole idea that it's like people have their own opinions, and we can work with that magic. We can work to trust our mother nature in ourselves, our inner mother nature, that you are born this way. If you're born, even if you're not gay, even if you're not bisexual, it doesn't matter. The point is that you have your own inner gayness. You have your own, intimacy, your own, when you love friends, you love. Love is love. It has no boundaries. When you put boundaries into it, goes back into ego, goes back down, goes back to negative, right? We don't want that, because that attracts more negativity, right? And if you're sick and tired of that shit, I know I am. At least I was, and then, meaning I am, meaning like I was tired of it, and then I just continued. So whenever I get these things, it's just like, no, I stand in my own power. That's just what standing in your own power, right? So, and squares to Pluto, right? That Pluto square is definitely showing us. And instead of escaping to libation, what is that term? Getting into drunkenness, we don't want that, right? So let's go back to what Bacchus represents here. So it's just like it's just like Jupiter. So it is hedonistic, but it's over-indulgence. So, and it's Jupiter on steroids, so to speak. So with this square there, conjunct Pluto, it's telling us to really figure out why we overindulge in the first place. Because we're escaping things, right? We're not facing our... So shadow work is another thing. This is what I've been doing many times. Or if there's... Shadow work goes both ways. Whether you're pointing at somebody for something that is a negative aspect or a positive aspect, because we live in the third dimension. Embracing that in yourself and saying, someone is a pedophile, instead of pointing a finger at them because you don't know where they're coming from. Sure, it hurts people, but that's not really your actual what do you call this? You do something about it, but the moment you identify with it, there's a projection that's happening, and you're just poisoning yourself at the same time. Sure, do something about it, but instead of like saying, pointing the finger, literally saying that person's evil, that person's like, oh, or even the opposite, where that person is like, I love you so much. So you're projecting your own. You don't, or when you adore or admire someone, you put them on a pedestal. That's shadow work. The shadow work has to be done through when you do shadow work, you start to realize that it's like, oh, I didn't embrace my own beauty. I didn't embrace my own stardom. I didn't embrace my... So there's those little qualities. It's never about words. It is about the energy. It's about our vibration, right? This isn't just also manifestation. It's all the laws of everything, where everything is energy. So if everything is energy, therefore what you feel about something is going to come through in what you do and what you believe. Belief stems from that energy, right? But that's where belief comes from, right? So when you go back inwards and you go back inwards and you go back inwards, you start to feel it. It starts with the body. It starts with grounding ourselves in the silence, in stillness. And if you're not okay with that, there's ways to go around it. Definitely try the Wim Hof method. Get yourself shocked with that whole, like, because for me, when I was doing meditation, I felt like there's a part of me that couldn't last as long. But now that I trained my body for the past 3 years, I just committed to it because it was working. Even the first time, because you really like surrender, you give up, you get into cold, you're like the first time, that's literally what it feels like. It feels scary because you want to run away. You don't run away. Don't go into some form of over-indulgence, right? And Pluto is teaching us to we can use that energy and say, breaking down of things that don't work. Now it's, Bacchus might feel like here it's like this sort of feels like, oh, we need to experiment with it and see where it goes from here. Overindulgence probably happens through weird relationships because it ties in with the square to Venus. Just unusualness, probably like, it has a creativity to it, but we can use a square to figure out why we have differences in the first place. Why do we experience this difference and there's this difference? And the thing is, it's time to stop thinking about it and just work on it. This is the thing we had to learn from this Pluto in Capricorn process, that the gift behind that is to work at something, but putting it into action right away, instead of like here, right? Aquarius is also representing a practical aspect to, that's why experimentation comes with it, right? You can't just here, and just go, it's just air, it's just farting and burping. It has no purpose. And Pluto reveals that it has to have meaningful modes. It can't be meaningless. It has to have meaning behind it. Of course, that's not the only thing, right? That the bigger picture is not that, but it's just a teaching tool. All these aspects of ourselves, aspects of the psyche, and also, dare I say, like past lives, are also part of this whole thing. I'm not going to go into much into past lives or anything like that, but so we can use these energies to kind of help us go back to ourselves. When I say ourselves, I don't mean just the separated self. You are a cell that is part of the whole picture. So you have a unique purpose, but at the same time you're part of the uniform thing, the collective, meaning not just this collective, but the galaxy, the entire universe, consciousness becoming aware of itself. But we cannot be conscious unless, not only through awakening, we cannot just be like that. We have to go back into, how do we connect with the invisible? How do we do that? Well, the 3D can't do that, but we have to sense it. This is why we use 3D elements and tools elements as tools, like the body, because it is energy. So energy. So even though eyes see things, the energy that you see through things it's kind of like there's this, because there is a veil of forgetfulness, but it's more like the eyes just can't do that. There's something that's blocked it. And because if we had all the information, if we knew from experiences, there would be no 3D. It doesn't make sense. Or at least there would be no form, at the very least. So let's work with those energies. There's the other planets that don't work in this case because they're not aspected to Venus. It's all connected anyways, but their focus is on Venus. So taking a look at this opportunity to dig deeper into our own self-worth and our own love, human and more than that, connecting, right? The horizontal with the vertical, bringing the vertical to the horizontal, right? If you don't know yet, go keep looking. Don't just wait for the apple to fall off the tree. But don't go picking the apple when it's not even ready yet. That's part of the whole thing, right? It's part of being connected as well. Okay, so just like in my previous videos, I'm going to end this with just being in the moment and surrendering to it. If you're in your car and you're driving, of course, you don't want to just, but it's bringing your attention to the body as well. Not the thought, not the stories. Feel the breath. Really bring your attention to that. Don't force anything. Just continue this practice even when this video ends. Many blessings.